Hey everyone, in my last video, I showed you how to write code 3D games using Three.js. But for today, we are going 2D. I vibe coded these 2D games using agent skills just like last time. An RTS, a 2D RPG prototype, and this pixel platformer. And once again, these started to blow up all over Twitter, and everyone wanted to know how I did it. And so in today's video, I'm going to show you how to vibe code 2D games, and we'll be rebuilding this platformer that you see here. I'll be walking you through everything from start to finish. And this workflow that I'll be showing you will work with Claude Code, Cursor, or Codex, whatever your favorite vibe coding tool is. And the key unlock, as before, is agent skills. I've built a Phaser.js skill, which is a 2D game engine, and it will handle everything for you from the sprite sheets to the physics to the animation and basically all the stuff that would take you hours if you were doing it manually. And as a bonus, I will be showing you a second skill, which is a Playwright game testing skill. This gives the AI eyes to be able to see what is being built. It can automatically open up the browser, press keys, and effectively play the game for you and test to see if the functionality works. So if you've ever wanted to learn how to vibe code 2D games but could never get started, this is the video for you. If you want the exact skills, prompts, and source code from today's tutorial, I've made them completely free as part of my Insiders Club. I also send out weekly emails with tips, workflows, and early access and previews to all the stuff that's coming up. And if you want to go deeper, check out builderpack.ai. In fact, I just relaunched it to version 2. It includes my entire vibe coding workflow, configurations, agents, skills, commands, and basically all of the resources and source code from all of my videos that you see on YouTube. There's also a private Discord community where I share some exclusive updates and where other vibe coding builders hang out in order to exchange ideas and to share insights. And soon to come will be 2 additional resources. One of them will be specifically on AI game development, so topics like what you're seeing in today's video. And a second one will be about how to vibe code iOS apps. And so these will be landing soon and the price will be going up. So if you log in today, you will automatically get hold of these 2 resources at today's price. Link is in the description below. And without further ado, let's get started with today's video. All right, we are ready to get started. So you can see that all I have here is a blank Visual Studio Code project. The only 2 things that we have over here are this .claude and .codex folders. And if we just jump into them, you will see that the only things that are present are the skills that we'll be using today. So the first skill, which is the Phaser game dev skill, is the key one, which will enable us to be able to build these Phaser.js based 2D games. The whole point about this skill is that it's been something that I've created and then I've iterated upon as I build more and more projects. And just going back to this question about how I build skills, I actually have a skill creator skill. And this is what I use all the time whenever I'm building a new skill. So whether it's for Three.js or for Phaser.js. And you can get hold of this skill creator skill from Anthropic's very own GitHub repository. But it's worthwhile noting that I don't actually use that one. I've actually built my own version called Skill Creator Plus. And this one is a more advanced version that I've trained on several different skills that I've seen. And I find that it's more effective. And it's been very useful for me to build skills such as this skill or this Playwright testing skill that you see over here. If you want to get hold of that, it's at builderpack.ai and you can check it out in the link in the description below. But you don't need any of that for this tutorial because all of these skills I've made available for free. So you will be able to follow along with this tutorial completely without having to get hold of anything else. Okay, so you might be asking, why do I have 2 folders? One of it is the skill folder for Codex and the other one is for Claude. Now, Codex actually uses an open standard for skills, and this one is technically cross-compatible with everything else, open code or any other IDE that you have out there, whereas the one has a slightly different format. It is worthwhile noting, though, that if you're using something like Cursor through over here, you can actually make use of these skills as well. So if you open up Cursor and you go down to this Rule Skills and Agents, you will see that Cursor is able to pull in the skills from Claude. So this entire tutorial will work completely fine whether you're using Codex, whether you're using Claude Code, whether you're using Cursor. And it's entirely your choice. The version that you see over here, which has the parallel scrolling backgrounds, the player can attack, and you can see all of the animations are working correctly, as well as the tiling and all the props all work out fine. If you want to, this version was built using GPT 5.2 and GPT 5.2 Codex. I had really good success with this, and if you've been following Twitter, I think a lot of people are starting to come to realize how powerful 5.2 is, especially when you run it with high reasoning. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to make use of Claude Code and Opus 4.5 to build something similar. And let's just see how well it does. I'm going to jump back into Visual Studio Code. The other skill that we'll be making use of is this Playwright testing skill. Now, this one is a skill, Claude Code, to be able to automatically test your game for you. So if there's a bug, it will be able to identify the bug for you and then try to fix it. And it's a really cool process. And I think this is one of the key unlocks of being able to make use of that. In order to make use of this skill, you will need to install the Playwright MCP server. It's completely free and it was really simple to install. You just have to add this to your JSON file. So I think we're ready to begin so that we can see if we can get by the end of this tutorial to something as close to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the exact process that I took to get to this stage. And with that, you can take it and continue iterating upon it and adding new functionality. But my whole goal is to just demonstrate to you how easy it is to vibe code 2D games like this using agent skills. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so we are back in Visual Studio over here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to collapse everything on the left and close this off. So the first thing I want you to do is that we need to prepare our folder structure for the art assets. Okay, so we will create a new folder and I'll call this public. And I like to create another folder within that called assets. This folder structure over here just enables us to put all of our assets into one location. And so that when we deploy this onto the web, it will be able to be ready for people to play. If you don't put this properly, you will have loading errors because it won't be able to locate the assets when it is loading it from a web server. So anyway, if you did not understand any of that, don't worry. Just know that we are going to put everything to do with our art assets into this folder over here. And speaking of art assets, let's take a look at the art assets that we'll be making use of today, that we'll be trying to build today. Assets that we'll be making use of is this one called Oakwoods Environment Asset. And this is by Brulov. And this is available on itch.io and it's completely free to use. So what you want to do is just click on download. And over here, you can choose to donate a certain amount to support the developer, or you can just head on over to this no thanks to the downloads link. Once you're over here, you click on download, and this should bring up your file explorer. I'll suggest putting it into the assets folder that we just created. And there you have it over there. All right, so you can see here, I put this into the public assets folder that we created earlier. And all you have to do is just extract this right now. So I'm going to delete the zip folder and take a look what's inside. I'm also going to change this just to say Oakwoods because it doesn't need all of the additional prefix. So you're pretty much done in terms of getting hold of the assets. Switch back over into VS Code and you will see that the assets are sitting over here. And it's worthwhile taking a look at the type of assets that we're working with because this is really important when you're working in game development. So if you go into this character folder, you will see charblue.png. And if you actually see what this is something called a sprite sheet. So what happens is that animation is played by playing 1 frame, 2 frame, 3 frame, 4 frames, 5 frames, 6 frames. And you will see this one is harder to look at, but the first one is the idle animation. The second row is the slash animation. And the third one is the running animation and so on and so forth. So you will need Phaser to understand how to read this sprite sheet in order to play the animations. In the past, without AI, you would have to program this manually in order for it to understand that the first row is idle, the second row is slash, the third row is running and so on and so forth. But as I will be showing you right away, you don't need to do any of that thanks to the power of AI now. This is all done automatically for you. Okay, so let's take a look at something else. So you can see this background folder over here. This one shows you the 3 different backgrounds that are available. And the way that this works is that there are 3 layers to the background so that you can get the nice parallax effect that you see over here. So let me just jump back into the game and you will see that as I run, you will notice that the background actually scrolls at a different speed. This is called parallax scrolling. And the way that you achieve that is by having 3 different layers of the background. When you're running, it moves them at different speeds. So it gives you a sense of, okay? So this is one of the other tricks that game developers like to use. All right, so jumping back into Visual Studio Code over here. The next one we want to look at is decorations. You will see that you will have placed within the level. These are the simplest because all they have to do is just load it in and place it there. There's no animation and it can just be loaded in like a static object. And then the final one is something called a tile set. Now, if you look at this is how you would piece together the entire level. So there are different parts. Think of it as like little Lego blocks. And in order for you to construct something that looks like this, that you see over here, which piece of this tile map to be loading at any one time. And in order to do so, in the past, like I said, you would have to create some kind of level editor. But as I'll be showing you, you wouldn't need to do that with what we're doing today. Okay, so that's the introduction to all the assets. Now, I'm going to open up Claude Code, as you see over here. And we'll be making use of just 2 key prompts in today's tutorial. So what I've done is that I've also provided the prompts that we'll be using in this folder called prompts over here. And let's take a look at the first one. The first one really just says that it's going to be a way for us to build something called an index JSON. And this will allow the AI to know what assets are available to it in order for it to build its game. And all we need to do is just copy this prompt that you see over here and paste it into Claude. All right, and you will see all it's saying is that study the assets in the Oakwood folder, and then create an assets.json that is an index to the assets. Account for the sprite sheet animations, account for the tile sets, and then so that we can reference this assets for phaser. And then what I'm going to do is say, use the phaser.js skill. And before we go ahead and kick this off, type /model and make sure you're using Opus 4.5. In fact, just as I hit this off just now, I was actually using Sonnet 4.5, which is not what you want to do. So Opus 4.5 is the best model and is exactly what you want to do for a task like this. Okay, so we're just going to run this command one more time. And while this is running, I'm going to actually make use of a tool that I've created in order to help avoid mistakes like that in the future. So I'm just going to open up a new terminal over here. And what I'm going to do is just type npx at Chong-U, cc status line at latest init. And you will see very shortly what this will do. This effectively will add something called a status line to your Claude code so that it will show you what model you're using and several other things that will help you to avoid the bug mistake that I made earlier. Okay, so this has been installed and this will only pick up once I've restarted Claude. So we will wait until this step completes here. But you can see that what it's doing is that it's looking through the folder that we had over here with all of these assets, and then it's going to create a single file index in order for it to know what assets are available. So once this has been created, we'll draw back and then we'll talk about what's happened there. Okay, so you can see that we are now done with the assets.json creation. So very quickly, I just want to show you what this has achieved. If we take a close look at what is being stated over here, it says that it has summarized all of the different assets. It knows that there are 3 backgrounds. It knows that there's a character. It knows that there are decorations. Even the shop is animated, and it knows about the tile set. And I think it's really important to understand why this is really important for it to get right. So let's take a look, right? It's been able to automatically find out that there's idle, run, attack 1, attack 2, jump, fall, roll, and death. Okay, and so if we actually pull this up right now, you will see that this is indeed correct, right? It's very important to double check this because sometimes you will notice that it may not always get it right. You can see that it says that the idle animation is from 0 to 3. And then it says the run animation is from 7 to 13. And you will notice that this doesn't look exactly correct. And I've seen this sometimes get it right the first time. In other cases, it actually will make small little mistakes like this. Okay, so let's actually take a look at this, right? So the way that you will see it is that this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. And then after it goes 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so I will say that this is probably not going to be right. And so I'm going to challenge this and just get this right. And I'll probably update the skill to be more aware of this. And remember earlier I said that you would have to do this manually, but in this case, it's managed to automatically identify different animations and the frames, but sometimes it can still get things wrong. So let's try this very quickly. I've taken a look at the assets.json and what you've said, and there are a few mistakes. All right, looking at the character, the idle animation actually goes from frames 0 to 5. And then there are 2 frames empty in frames 6 and 7. The attack runs from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So it goes from 8 to 13. And then there are 2 empty frames in 9 and 10. Verify that this is the correct understanding that I have, and then make the appropriate fixes. Okay, so I think this is quite important to get right. So I'm just going to tell it. Having done this so many times now, I always find that it's quite important to get at least some of this fixed correctly, because otherwise, in some cases, the errors that you see may not be as obvious. Okay, so it's going to study the sprite sheet a little bit more and then verify whether or not our understanding is correct. Overall, you can see that is quite good. So let's just take a look at the tile set. It says that it's a 21 by 15 tile. So we go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So it is correct. It is 21 by 15. So it's got that correct. And it knows about all the different tiles. Okay, let's take a look at what it says. And yeah, so I think it actually got, all right, so it's going to do that. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, so actually it did identify that I made a mistake with the empty frames in 9 and 10. I think it's because I'm using this per flow. So as I was counting, it actually got the numbers wrong. So it seems that it has actually understood the mistake that has been made and it has now got it correct. Okay, perfect. So now that we've made this fixes, let's go ahead and implement the game. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to switch into plan mode. I'm going to head on over back into this art assets and I'm going to grab this. And I find that this is actually quite useful to do. So if you save this image here, and I'm going to call it mockup, okay? this will be very useful for the next step. And the reason for that is that sometimes, even though it has all these individual assets, without a mockup, you will not be able to get a good understanding of the scene. And I've shown this with Three.js as well. In certain cases, you do not have mockups. You just have the assets and the different character elements. The trick here is that you can just go into Nano Banana Pro, give it the tile sets, and then ask it to generate a mockup for you. And this is exactly what I did in my last video. But in this case, we have a good mockup. So let's just make use of this. Great. So with this being done, we're going to use the second prompt over here. Okay. So I'm going to say, let's use the Phaser.js skill to replicate the image. And I'm going to change this so that it actually references the mockup. All right. So you've got a mockup here. Plan it out first. Add the 3 background layers first. Then the tile set for a flat ground in a single layer. And then place the character and animate it with controls. And then that's the baseline. So I think what I'm going to do is step 1, step 2, step 3, and that's the baseline. And then remember to add this one where we say to reference the assets.json for the list of assets. As you can see up here, I'm saying use the Phaser.js skill so that it is going to be able to verify that this is working right. Okay, now we're going to use plan mode, and I activated it using Shift Tab because I want this to occur step by step. And this is the advice that I'll give you. Rather than trying to one-shot everything, I think it's really important to always try to think of game development or any software development for that matter as a step-by-step process. One-shotting is fun, just as a demonstration of the capabilities of the model. But in actual development, you want to take things step by step. And this is the best advice that I can give you. And the reason for that is that inherently, development is always iterative, and it's a lot easier to fix bugs as you see them along, as opposed to it trying to build so many things at the same time and then end up with lots of different things that are affecting one another. Okay. All right. So we're going to let this plan run along. And then once it comes up with a plan, we will draw back and see what we're going to do. So what you're actually seeing here, if you take a look, is the background correctly laid out with the various layers correctly. And I'm just going to jump in here to show you what's going on. But you can see that in addition to implementing the background, it is making use of the Playwright MCP server that we saw earlier to open up the URL and then taking a screenshot so that it can verify whether or not the screen looks correct. But this is exactly why having the Playwright MCP testing server is going to be very useful, especially when you're building something like games. Because a lot of times in games, things are going to be visual. And as you can see here, it's already created a character as well. And the character is just jumping down. And what it's doing is that I'm just going to jump back into Visual Studio over here. And you can see added the character with physics, and then it's going to take a screenshot. And you can see, take a look over here. It says phase 6, verified character is visible and standing on the ground with physics collision working. And indeed, that is true, right? Because you can see that their character is landing from the sky and then it's landing on the ground that you see over here. So this is the process of why using agent skills as well as the current MCP servers can be very useful for things like game development. And now that it's created that, it's going to go ahead and add the animations and the input controls. All right, so now it says it's done it. And this is the really interesting part, because what you will see now is that it's going to check to see if the animation is playing correctly. And then it's going to see if the controls are working correctly as well. So what Playwright is going to be able to do is that it's going to be able to press keys, as you see over here. Okay. And then I think the best way to show this is that if I actually make this screen a little bit smaller, okay, so that you can see, because what you will notice is that Playwright is going to actually play my game for me in order to determine if the controls are working correctly and in order to determine if things are proceeding as planned. I'm just going to drag this over here very quickly and just take a look. I see that there might be a rendering artifact. Let me reload and test the jump. Okay, and then it can say here, let me test the movement controls, pressing right arrow to move the character. Okay, so the first thing you notice is that there's a rendering artifact, and indeed, right? Okay, so there's a couple of issues that we want to fix over here. So it's trying to use Playwright to perform a bunch of different tasks, but it still managed to get some of these things wrong. And this is the interesting thing that I've seen, is that sometimes it's really smart and it's able to see, hey, wait a minute, there's an artifact and I need to fix it. And other times it tries to think very cleverly. And I've seen this more with Opus 4.5 than with GPT 5.2. It actually managed to get to the state that we've all seen before. So let's just pull up this one that we see over here. So with GPT 5.2, it was actually able to get hold of the other animations with no issues. So it's quite interesting to see. And remember, I actually did say to go step by step, and Opus 4.5 just went ahead and did not let me verify each way. It was able to get things to a pretty decent state, right? Because you can see movement is working, the background is layered correctly as well, but just a bunch of things that would have been better for it to verify before we move ahead. So the first thing we're going to fix is this idle animation. So it's definitely got the framing wrong. So I'm going to just see if we can figure out what's going on over here. There is an issue with the Iterate animation. It looks like the frame size is miscalculated. Remember to refer to assets.json and fix the visual issue. Okay, so I think that's the biggest issue that we want to fix over here, because everything else is actually quite okay. Like, it's managed to layer the background correctly and it's managed to get the controls in. It's just the rendering of the player is not correct. And even though Playwright managed to do quite a good job of verifying different things, it did happen to get this one wrong. Okay, so it's not perfect. And like I mentioned, I've had more success in getting things working correctly using GPT 5.2 with the previous version. So this is something to observe. For Opus 4.5 is indeed very good. One can get very far, but oftentimes it can try to be too clever and move ahead a little bit too quickly. Okay, it's managed to fix it appropriately. So if you look over here, I'm just going to make this screen a little bit bigger so you can see it is indeed working correctly now. All right, so the Iterate animation is playing correctly now, and the movement of the character is working as expected. So there's no longer this strange double counting. And I'm going to show you something really interesting about why it was not able to spot this error earlier. So what happens, first of all, let's just jump in here, all right, and just take a look. So I'm going to show you what it says, all right? So as part of its testing, it says, I can see the issue, all right? The ghost artifact appears to the left of the main character, indicating that the frame width is incorrect. And you've actually take a look at what this is seeing over here. So this is what Claude has assessed. So he says, hey, wait a minute, like this thing that we see over here is just not right. And you can see that Playwright continues to save all of these screenshots in order to verify things are working correctly. And the reason why it thought it was working correctly is that, look at this movement right screenshot. It thought that the movement to the right was working because that the character has moved to the right, but actually it was because of a bug earlier. So this is the reason why it's not a foolproof system. It can introduce errors, but hopefully it shows you how clever it can actually be if it doesn't have a cascade of different bugs that you see. Okay, so this is working correctly now. It was just simply a calculation, the frame width that was wrong. And I have updated the skills since recording to try to avoid this error, but sometimes it still gets it wrong. If you actually look over here, as part of the skills, it actually tries to avoid miscalculations. All right, but in this case, it required a small little fix, but we're in pretty good shape now. Okay, so I think overall it's actually looking pretty good. Make the last few changes to this to get this working correctly. Okay, so what you'll see is that the animation is working correctly, but the run animation and the jump animation not playing right. And the last thing we want to do is that we want this map to not just be a single level. We want this to be infinitely scrolling to the right with parallax. So let's just do that one first. The background currently looks great, but I would like parallax scrolling and infinite ability to move to the right. Okay, I'm going to use the phaser skill to get this done. Okay, so let's take a look and see if this will be able to get this to work infinitely as well. All right, because if you recall in this version here, we actually have infinite scrolling with parallax as well, which is a really nice effect. And it's just a little thing that ends up making the game feel a lot more polished. Okay, so let's jump back to, all right, so this is what we're hoping to be able to do, and we'll see if it's going to be able to get there. Okay, all right, so let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to just expand this really big now. So you can see it is infinitely scrolling to the right now. There is a parallax effect happening with the trees. Because it's repeated with just a single tile, it doesn't look very smooth, but we can fix that up quite simply. But overall, you can see that this is moving in the right direction. All right. Yeah, it actually is bad practice because if you see this here, this gray version of Chrome is actually launched by Claude Code in order to figure out if things are working correctly. It says that scrolling is working. All right, no right boundary, you can keep moving right, so that is correct. So let's fix up the animations now. The play animations are not correct. Idle is perfectly fine, but moving is not, and jumping is not. Fix them. Okay. And we are reaching dangerously close with context. In fact, with 45% context is probably a good time to just compact it up. But you know what? Let's just push ahead. And I think in the next round, we'll definitely want to compact out our context. Okay, so let's just give this a shot and see if it's going to be able to fix this. Okay, and you can see here that the Playwright is actually testing the run animation automatically. And it's taking screenshots as it goes along. So because animation takes a while to render, so it's taking multiple screenshots. And immediately you can see that it's identifying that there is a bug with the animation over here. So they say that the duplicate was likely a rendering artifact. So this is really interesting. So what I'm going to do now is, because there's only 37 context, I'm going to do compact it. Well, the compact is completed. Let's see if it's going to be to fix this issue over here. So I'm going to say the run animation is still wrong. It seems that there's a bleeding from the frame. So if you take a look at the screenshot, it's loading the top part of the frame above, and it's causing the height to be wrong. Okay, and then we just just put this image in and see if it's going to be able to fix this. Okay, because we compact this, you'll see context remaining is 37% for now, but it should update to show you the latest context quite shortly. Okay, all right, so you saw that, all right, because the context needed to refresh once Claude came back. So we actually managed to reclaim almost double the context. So 78% is a good context to have so that it doesn't end up in having context flood. Okay, so you can say, looking at the screenshot, that's bleeding from the row above into the run. This suggests that the frame height calculation might be off. Okay, like I said, this is quite odd because I have done this with Opus previously and it did not have this issue. So this is, I guess, just an unfortunate run. It tends to get this right most of the time. But let's see if he's going to be able to fix it now. All right, so you can see that this is working correctly now. Okay, so the jumping is working as expected, and the running is also running correctly as well. The reason why this was wrong is that there was an issue with the frame and the frame height. For some reason, in this run, it got the frame height wrong. And the moment you get this frame height wrong, that's where you get this very strange artifact going on. So this is a quite interesting thing because in different runs, I've never had this problem. And it just so happens that just looking at this and looking at the previous JSON that I had, this was the issue. So this is a really important point here, right? Whenever you're using skills, and I've been updating these skills along, sometimes you can introduce regression. So I'm going to do something here. I'm going to say, how did you end up getting that wrong? It never happened before. Please look at the phaser game dev skill and update it so that this mistake doesn't happen again. All right. So this is the step that you want to do. As skills are not a one-time work kind of thing. You always want to continue to improve it as you continue to build more projects. And like I said, the skill that I've been using in this one is actually a skill that I've hit on since I last recorded the video. So I might have caused a bug in it, but this is the way that it works. So while this is going on, let's actually continue looking over here. Okay, so you can see that the game is working fine. I wish this was full screen, but it doesn't really matter. That's actually just a viewport issue. But you can see the background is working. The character is also animating correctly. And then the only minor things that you want to say is that a little bit lower, as we see over here. And the player should really be sitting on top of the tile. So these are minor things, but ultimately it's gotten to a pretty good state. And I think like the main issue, as we saw over here, was just really about the animations. Everything about the controls and how the animation state was running and linked with the controls was all correct. It was just, it got the frame wrong. There's just one tiny mistake can result in it looking pretty bad. Okay, so let's just see what it says over here because I'm actually interested, man. So it says here that quickly note about square frames being common, and then added check for square frames first, non-square dimensions for character sprites, and as your row count matches column count. So this is actually one of the reasons why it actually got the calculation wrong. Okay, it actually thought that this was a square. And in this case, let's actually just take a look. But if you actually check the dimensions and you see over here, right, the dimensions is 448 by 392. So he got it wrong. And this is just one of those mistakes that was introduced. Okay, but otherwise it actually got pretty far. So let's actually finish this up. Okay, just a few more things to fix. The ground tile is a bit too high. It needs to be lower, as you can see. And take a screenshot once that is fixed to verify. Secondly, the player should be standing on top of the tile. Right now, he's sinking into it a little bit. All right, let's fix those two things and hopefully we'll get to a good state. And I'm assuming he's going to get this right at this time around, but you never know. He can be surprised sometimes how he can get some of these things wrong. Or just try to adjust the ground position. And so you see that, I'm not sure whether you saw it, but it is correctly putting the player on top of the ground now. It's still a little bit low, but it's going to take a screenshot. So he says the ground tile is lower and it's still not quite right. The ground is still not anchored to the bottom of the view. And I'm okay with the player thinking of the ground a little bit. I think that's totally fine. So let's not get too nitpicky about that one. And you can see that it's actually moved it higher now, which is really odd. And I'm going to actually steer it midway. You can actually do this with Claude. It's trying to be too clever now. I'm going to stop it and say, stop what you're doing. Keep a single row. Just simply move the ground tiles lower. So you can see here, it's trying to move the tile lower, but it actually ended up raising it a bit higher. So it's going to take a screenshot and then you can see it's right over here. So hopefully you'll be able to figure out that, hey, wait a minute, you actually made it higher rather than lower. So you should be able to fix this. All right, so you see, he actually did spot it. It says there's a gap at the bottom. So it's going to try to adjust offset more. And then it's going to continue to offset it until it gets to the bottom. So this is like the process in which it will take in order to get this working correctly. Okay. So it will just continue to be able to load the game and then take a screenshot and then adjust from there. So this is like automated testing to some extent. Playwright is quite useful for something like this, but it can be a little bit slow. Sometimes you've got to be a bit patient, especially when you're dealing with things like round map. Okay, all right, and you can see it says with this value is much closer to the bottom, so it's going to try to push it even further down to the very bottom edge. I'm going to show you over here as it continues to adjust the values. It's automatically taking screenshots and it's lowering it, so to the point that it's actually low enough to get to where we want. Finally, I'm going to say final thing, let's add an action button where the character plays the slash animation. And I'm just going to say use the phaser skill and remember the JSON. That's because we're running low on context, and it's just really useful just to make sure that it's aware of things that you learned before. It's going to add the attack animation with spacebar, and then it's going to trap the animation state. So let's just see how this works. There we go. Yeah, I'm pressing spacebar now, and we can see that this is working correctly. Yeah. All right. So it's gotten to where it needs to get to, and it's just going to do a bunch of little fixes. All right, so the attack is working now, and we've pretty much gotten to where we needed to. Obviously, there are little tweaks that you want to make. For example, the distance between the foot and the ground. And there's also this little gap over here, but these are small little things that you can always put later. I think what we're going to do is add. All right, so now let's add some of the props and decorations into the level to make it look better. All right, so this one should be a pretty straightforward thing where it's just going to just add some of the elements within the screen so that it actually has a visual. So it looks a little bit less empty, because right now all we see is just the ground and then the trees in the background. So it'd be nice to have a bunch of props. So you can see here it's loading up, and this is what I told you, like I told you earlier, right? It's going to look at the assets, the JSON, and then it knows all the decorations. So this is just a much faster way. It didn't need to go through the file system in order to then try to figure out. It knows everything that's available away. All right, you can see here it's put things down, but everything's floating. All right, so you can see here it's going to take a screenshot, right, in order to verify if everything's looking correct. And you can see straight away it says that the decorations are visible but are floating above the ground. So there you go. It's going to start moving things. So it's going to continue to try to move the props down so that they are not floating above the ground. Okay, and it's gone ahead and it's managed to move everything down. I did have to guide it a little bit because it was still not quite getting under the ground, which is quite interesting. And but the level looks much better now. Okay, as you can see. Cool. Right. So then you have it, right? You can jump. There are props all around. So it's quite close to the state that we had earlier. Like I said, it did struggle the most, as we saw, with two things, which is we got the frame size wrong. And the moment that gets wrong, the animations all look warped and quite buggy. But then in terms of like getting things together, once that was fixed, it was all just little nitty-gritty things like the distance to the ground and a small thing like that. And yeah, this brings us to the end of the tutorial. In my opinion, actually doing 3D games is a little bit easier because when it comes to 2D art, you will notice that it's really about how the assets are set up. And there's no real standard way for setting up these assets. You need to make sure that you get the dimensions right, and AI can get pretty far automatically and help you with a lot of the legwork. But if it does make a little error here and there, it can compound quite quickly. But overall, hopefully you found this tutorial useful. I'll be continuing to iterate on these skills and continuing to try to build more 2D games as well as 3D games going forward. So if you enjoyed today's tutorial, give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so that you'll always be the first to know whenever new content like this drops. And oh, if you haven't seen my previous tutorial where I actually do a very similar process, but for 3D games using Three.js, you might want to check out this video right over here. All right, till next time, I'll see ya.